But now let's turn to Iran. The country's president has ordered the start of nuclear talks with the United States, hours after President Trump said that he was hopeful of a deal to avert military action against the Islamic Republic. The US president has threatened military action in response to widespread anti-government protests in which thousands of people have been killed. Iran's leaders have likened the protests to a coup attempt. Well, we can cross over to Doha to speak to our colleague Barbara Plett-Usher, who joins us now. So, Barbara, where are we in terms of these possible talks?
Well, this is the first official statement from Iran confirming that the talks will go ahead from the Iranian president. It was tentative, actually. He said they should go ahead if the environment is right, that if it is free from threats and free from unreasonable expectations. Now, the threats obviously referring to the potential for a U.S. airstrike from that massive military buildup in the Gulf. The unreasonable expectations probably referring to various demands that have been made by the U.S., because the Iranians are saying these talks should focus on its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions, whereas the Americans have said they want the deal also to cover Iran's support for militant groups in the region and its ballistic missile program. And the Iranians have said that's just not up for negotiation. So it's not really clear how they're going to square this circle, but we understand they are going to meet. The expectation is on Friday in Turkey. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, this has been organized, coordinated by regional powers. So Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, Oman have been very active in setting this up. And the Iranian president in his statement specifically said the Iranians had decided to go along with this because they were responding to requests from friendly countries, which really points to this deep distrust that the Iranians have of the U.S. You remember last June when the Americans bombed Iranian nuclear facilities, they did so just on the eve of a scheduled round of talks. So I think the Iranians think, well, that could still happen this time. And so they've been also warning very strongly that if they are attacked, they will respond swiftly and quite strongly. The top military commander in Iran said they had learned from that experience in June. They had responded too slowly. They had now moved from what he called a defensive posture to an offensive strategy.
Barbara, as always, many thanks. Barbara Plett-Usher joining us from Doha. A lot to pick up there of what Barbara was saying, and we can do that with our guest, Fawaz Georges, Professor of International Politics at the London School of Economics. And Fawaz, you've written extensively about the region. We heard there Barbara Plett-Usher talking about Iranians being very wary of the United States, not least ahead of those talks that were meant to take place in June last year. The US bombed Iranian nuclear facilities. So what kind of way is Iran going into these potential talks on Friday?
I have no doubts in my mind that Iran is going to talk to the Americans while under threat of war. That's the reality. President Trump has deployed a large naval and air force to the Gulf. He even raised the possibility of a regime change in Tehran. And most or all of Iran's choices are really very bad. The reality is it's facing some very severe social and economic grievances at home by a large number of population, and now the threat of war. And that's why I think if and when the meeting takes place in Istanbul, because the Americans have not confirmed the meeting on Friday, but this is really would be the last chance for de-escalation, because I would say that the risks of war are really real, 6 or 7 out of 10.
That's really quite an eye-awakening way that you describe it. The issue also is that the scope of these talks, the United States wants to widen them somewhat. They want to talk about Iran's ballistic missile program, which is a red line for the regime. And they also want to talk about the support that Iran has for militant groups in the region. So it's not just about the nuclear program that Iran has been working on.
In fact, let me be direct and say what President Trump is demanding from Iran is really surrender, literally surrender. and that if Iran accepts to get rid of, shut down its nuclear program, if Iran accepts to get rid of its ballistic missiles, if Iran accepts to end its support for regional allies, it means the end of the regime. It's a great humiliation. And that's why the Iranians insist on basically talking about only the nuclear portfolio, as opposed to their deterrence, which is ballistic missiles, and also their relations with their allies. And I think what the regional powers have been trying to do, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, and Oman, are trying to find a framework to try to separate the various questions. And my take on it is that the United States is coordinating very closely with the Israelis, because the Israelis, and in particular Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is demanding not only Iran shuts down its nuclear program, is to have limits on its ballistic missiles, because the Israelis believe that Iran's ballistic missile represents a major deterrent force. So that's why we have to wait and see if and when the meeting takes place, if President Trump really agrees to focus only on Iran's nuclear program. And a final point, I think it seems to me that Iran has already agreed to make painful concessions to either shut down its nuclear program or even suspend it, and even agreed to ship its enriched uranium to Russia, as it did in 2015. So the Iranians are trying to make concessions. The question is, does President Trump, does he really believe that Iran is vulnerable? Iran is on its knees. And this is really a golden moment to strike a fatal blow against the regime. And this could be a major, major miscalculation, like the miscalculation the Americans made in 2003 when they attacked Iraq.